Most people in Silicon Valley, you know, they have a hammer and everything is a nail. And that hammer is tools, and they're going to build a tool for everything. And the mindset is pure software. AI is going to do everything. Humans are irrelevant. Humans aren't even going to exist in the future.
Francis Pedraza, thank you so much for joining me on 20 Minute Leaders.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
It's a pleasure to have you. We actually met for the first time 7 years ago. You came to speak to our summer class at MIT LaunchX. It was about Everest, which I know that it's a long time back for you now with all the different things that you've done since then. But thank you for being such a source of inspiration for us back then. It was really fantastic.
Thanks for remembering and for reaching out.
Of course, of course. I'm really excited to have you here. Francis, I'm not going to do it justice to go over the incredible bio because you've actually had a pretty incredible upbringing, a pretty global one, but all sorts of diverse activities. I'd love to just spend the first few minutes going a little bit over your journey. Who are you? What are your passions? And I think that'll be a really good leeway into the things you're doing today and some source of inspiration for young entrepreneurs like myself.
My mother grew up in Iran and came to the United States before the revolution, but when the revolution happened, her world changed. And she had finished her undergrad, but she dropped out of graduate school and became an entrepreneur and worked really, really hard to succeed and did. And then when she had me, she sold her company and focused on raising me. My father grew up around the world. His father worked for Procter and Gamble and other American companies, so he spent some time growing up in places like Japan and the Philippines and Venezuela. And so I think I got the immigrant value set, which is a lot of hustle and determination and hard work and a sense of I think patriotism for the United States. That this is a place where dreams can happen, and you're in a free country. You have property rights, rule of law, and you can build something here and express your potential. And so that was my upbringing, and my life changed. I was pretty frustrated in both public and private schools for a variety of reasons until I discovered this incredible internet entrepreneur who was teaching hundreds of students on Skype. Zoom did not exist back then, but he happened to be a local, and he was teaching them a 5-year course in the great books of Western civilization. And the first book we studied was Homer's Iliad, and then the next was the Odyssey, and then we went on to read many of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, and then the medieval scholastics, Renaissance and Enlightenment, and moderns in a number of subjects, and reading the original sources, writing about them, debating them, discussing them. And so I developed this passion for the humanities. And people ask me, how did you go from that to starting a company? My first company was called Everest. You remember it. It was an iPhone app to help people achieve personal goals. And I thought that Steve Jobs had his metaphor that technology could be a bicycle for the human mind. That it would almost be like an Iron Man suit. Like we could express our potential with these tools at a pace that we'd never been able to before. You could move at the speed of thought. And then we sort of live in this dystopian reality where, that T-shirt that has the ape and then Homo sapien standing tall and then humans behind a laptop and we look like an ape again. It's like we live in this dystopian reality where it feels like we're slaves to our devices instead of the other way around where the technologies are empowering us. And why is that? And so with Everest, I was trying to build a social network except around doing things instead of around who and you would have all your goals in the app. And I thought that we could live up to that Da Vincian dream, have a new renaissance, and have people pursue their full potential and have technology actually help. But the company failed. The app failed, and it was a very humbling sort of Icarus experience where I had to learn a number of lessons, both about how to build a great product, how to build a great business, um, but it also made me rethink some of the fundamentals. And with Invisible, my current company, I've tried not to compromise on the vision. I think same vision, just different business model, different mission, and I've been trying to apply the learnings in a very, very different to solve a very, very different problem, which is industrializing knowledge work.
So before
So
we
yeah,
go into
that's
that, I
my
have to go
brief
back a
story.
little bit and understand about that Icarus-like experience, because inevitably almost all entrepreneurs are going to fail multiple times until they get to their success. And I'd love to focus a little bit on this Everest story. I remember when you came to speak to us at America. I remember how we all looked at this amazing product that you're building, and the charisma and the vision, and we all bought into it immediately. We knew this was going to be a major success. We loved it, and you have to understand, Francis, that this is a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds, entrepreneur wannabes that are getting so excited and are buying into this product, and that I need to have this closure to understand what happened there, and why do you call this an Icarus-like experience, and what lessons really do you translate now to your next venture?
Yeah. It was a beautiful product. Apple featured it many times. I think the design community recognized the work that our designers had done, it was before Facebook had an iPhone app. You remember when Facebook thought their corporate strategy for a few years was we were going to be web only, until they realized that it was a mistake. It was the early days of the App Store, and we had nearly 500,000 people use it. And their initial experience with Everest was kind of this, euphoric experience where you'd be like, wow, I could put all my goals and dreams into the app. I want to go to Italy. I want to look like Daniel Craig in a bathing suit. I want to run a marathon. I want to buy a house. All the things you just fantasize almost. That part was easy. But where the business failed is that 3, 4, 5, 6 months later, people would stop making progress on their goals. It was almost like Instagram for your goals, where you could post photos and videos, but also complete steps like a checklist and make progress. And the discipline required was too high. So our business model ended up looking like a gym. Gyms don't make money when you get fit. Gyms make money when you want to get fit. They divorce monetization from retention. And that was a key principle that we'd missed. And we thought we were going to have a business model that looked like Facebook, but basically that business model is selling dopamine like a drug, and like a digital cigarette, and it doesn't really require effort or follow through. And so, oops, beginner's mistake, and that was the Icarus moment.
So fast forward to today. Tell me a little bit about the insights of the industry and the market, even before we get to the actual product, because you have some really fascinating insights into where we're headed as a global economy and the workforce, and that's leading into what you're working on today. So I'd love to really get into your mind and understand the motivation behind what you're doing, and taking a little bit of a leap forward into what's going to happen in the next few decades.
Yeah, I'll start by describing what Invisible is, and then I'll share some predictions about the future. Every company has complex and custom processes, and they're very difficult to automate, even if you know about all the latest automation tools. Even if you're aware of robotic process automation, RPA tools, or workflow or no-code automation tools, or you're aware of the relevant, software point solutions for the particular function you're trying to automate, say it's sales or hiring or marketing, or an industry-specific, workflow you're trying to build. There are all these tools. There's an app for everything. Why isn't everything perfect yet? And the answer is that when you try to automate your process, any one tool might help you automate 5, 10, 15% of it, but you can't get the end-to-end solution you need to run your business tomorrow. So what do? You either do the rest of it in-house manually, or you outsource it to a traditional outsourcing company, a business process outsourcer, a BPO. And BPOs are like law firms. Their incentive is to bill you as many hours as possible. They're selling labor. They don't have an incentive to automate on their side. So Invisible is combining outsourcing and automation for the first time. And we call it work sharing. And our technology is a digital assembly line. And it has two layers. The first is, we coordinate 280 workers in 35 countries around the world who can log into secure virtual desktops and follow step-by-step instructions to do the manual portions of the work. And then the second layer is that, we break down these custom processes into standard steps. We think of it like sequencing the corporate process genome, and then we will automate those steps over time and they become reusable. And our business model is a win-win. As we automate your process, your unit price goes down and our margins go up. So it's a win-win. We have an incentive to automate and you see your prices drop. And our inspiration for all this was from what Henry Ford did to manufacturing in the early 20th century. This is like pre-World War One. The whole story of Ford from like 1908 to say 1960 is fascinating. But every year, the quality of their cars improved, the price decreased, their revenue increased, their margins increased, and the amount that they paid their workers increased. These things are in trade-off relationships. This shouldn't happen. And it only happens through the economic miracle of productivity gains, which create deflation. And deflation is good. I call it the deflationary gospel of capitalism. Better, faster, cheaper, better, faster, cheaper. And I think that we're at a stage where the mission of the company with Invisible is industrializing knowledge work. It's not automating knowledge work, it's industrializing it. And it implies a more nuanced view of automation. And this is what I'd like to communicate to your audience. Most people in Silicon Valley, they have a hammer and everything is a nail. And that hammer is tools, and they're going to build a tool for everything. And the mindset is pure software. AI is going to do everything. Humans are irrelevant. Humans aren't even going to exist in the future. Ultron is coming, and I think this is ridiculous. And I think this is where some of the liberal arts background kicks in. I think that, I think in many times in our history, we've always thought we're at an exponential curve and it didn't end up happening. Things happen quite differently. If you read Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, for example, with the tractors coming and automating agriculture, arguably the productivity gains of that era were greater than the ones that we're experiencing today. So this is what I think is likely to happen. I'll speak in very broad statistical terms. There are, just a pop quiz for your audience. There are 8 billion people on the planet. How many people play video games? Think about it. Pick
2 billion.
Pick your answer in your head. It's 3 billion, 3 to 4 billion. And then how many people do knowledge work, like make their livelihood on a computer in some way?
1 billion.
You did your homework. Exactly. So there are 1/3 to 1/4 as many knowledge workers as there are video gamers. Now, I'm going to attribute this to Kathy Wood at ARK Invest, whose research I follow closely. But basically, video gaming is like a sort of onboarding. It's training for the world's future knowledge workers. And if you think about what's going to happen over the course of our lifetime, do we think there are going to be less than 1 billion knowledge workers by the time we die, or more than 1 billion knowledge workers? And it just seems sort of obvious. I'll sort of ask the audience to grant it to me as a premise or an axiom or an assumption. I could defend it, but I just think it's so sort of obvious on its face that there are going to be many, many more knowledge workers. It doesn't make sense that 1 out of every 8 people work on the internet and 7 out of every 8 people work in the physical world. The digital world is becoming more and more part of everything that we do. Every industry is basically becoming digitized. So I think there are complementary trends in robotics, but I think that basically in our lifetime we're going to have up to 4 billion knowledge workers, maybe more. So think about what that means in terms of automation. If we were actually going to automate, even 50% of knowledge work, then we would go from 1 billion knowledge workers to 500 million knowledge workers in our lifetime, and 500 million other people would have to either be unemployed or find some physical work to do. But I think the opposite is going to occur. I think what we're going to experience is net negative automation. That even, and it doesn't mean we're not going to automate. We're going to automate a lot. But I think that the key economic principle is work can be created faster than it can be destroyed. And we can destroy it pretty fast. We can industrialize it and automate it and build all these tools pretty fast, but not as quickly as we can create it. And I think that we're going to be in a sort of dialectic where humans are doing a thing, and then computers learn how to do that thing, and then humans do another thing, like a new trick that we then teach the robots. And then we're going to keep doing that dialectic for a lot longer than people think. And I think that you want to design your business model around that, or at least our business model has been designed around that. I think that those are going to be the really interesting opportunities, not necessarily the selling pure SaaS, pure tools.
Francis, why do you care so much about this? Why? I mean, I saw how much you cared about Everest. I saw that passion there. I'm seeing the passion now. I'm feeling like as if I'm back in that MIT class in 2013. Why do you care so much about this stuff?
Because the future doesn't necessarily, I mean, almost by definition, should be very different than the past, and presumably better. And I think one way of thinking about it is, if you saw a human being that was 7 feet tall, you'd be like, wow, that person's pretty tall. If you saw a human being that was 8 feet tall, you'd be like, are you in the Guinness Book of World Records? Like you're like 3 standard deviations tall. If you saw a human being that was 70 feet tall, you'd call the military. It's an alien. It's not a human anymore. It's like, it's Godzilla. It's a giant. There are just not 80-foot tall humans. But that's a metaphor for what is possible with productivity gains. And I think that, the mindset of Silicon Valley has been the Turing test, which is when can computers do all the things that humans can do so that we can't tell. And I think that that's the wrong test for a number of reasons. I think a more interesting test is the Da Vinci test, which is, I think, Steve Jobs' original intent, which is, in the 21st century, when will the average person be more productive than the most productive person in the 15th century? And I think that, in sort of a one-on-one productivity test, Da Vinci with his piece of paper would school any millennial with their laptop and iPhone. And I think that that's the embarrassing thing, that we have all this information and all these tools, and yet we're spending so much of our time not being creative and not being strategic. So I think part of my message is deeply optimistic. I think I really believe in the good that humans are capable of. But part of it is like a real reprimand, in a sense, like an exhortation. Like Harvard said that up to 50%, 41% of the average knowledge worker's time is spent doing work that is repetitive. And I think we just did not get the education and the opportunities that we have, and we do not live in this like incredible era in order to spend half of our time doing irrelevant, doing work that isn't our highest contribution, right? And we should have a certain urgency around, solving problems, building, creating things. And I think that Peter Thiel has has the right philosophy, the right pessimism in his basic message, which is that the iPhone is new, our digital devices are new, but when you walk around our cities, they still feel like they're in the 20th century. Why is that? And I think that there are, Kathy Wood at Ark Invest talks about 5 technology platforms that are disrupting, pretty much have the potential to disrupt every aspect of our society. I think the 5 are, I'm going to hope I get this right, fintech and blockchain, robotics and industrial automation, AI and automation, which Invisible's in, sort of software automation, enterprise tools, the genomic revolution, everything is happening with CRISPR and gene editing, and everything that's happening with autonomous vehicles. I think those are the five. But the reason I list them out is that there's this is such an exciting time to be alive. But we kind of have to have a fire about it. What's the phrase? Light a fire under your ass.
I can definitely feel the fire, the passion, the urgency. I'm getting so much inspiration from you. But Francis, before we end, you have to tell me the Peter Thiel story. You told it to me 7 years ago back at MIT launch with Everest. And I need the short version now for the audience because it'll be just fascinating if you feel comfortable with it, of course.
Sure. He is one of the people that I look up to most still to this day. I think he's an intellectual giant. And I just graduated from college, and I was starting Everest, and I had some people interested in investing but hadn't been able to make a breakthrough there. And I met someone at an airport, right when sort of pretty much I was thinking about quitting, and I was working on the designs for the app. And somebody looked over my shoulder and saw the designs, and then I asked me some questions, and I answered them, and I told them about the idea, and they said, "Would you like to raise money?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "From who?" And I said, "Well, from who? Angels or VCs?" And I said, "Angels, but specifically, Peter Thiel." And he's like, "Well, I actually happen to go to Stanford with Peter, and I can introduce you." And I spent half an hour tops talking to Peter, telling him about it. And he said, "Well, send me some materials." And then I like wrote a 50-page business plan, and Everest created one of the first web-based pitch decks, and we released it right around Christmas, and didn't hear from him. And then New Year's Eve, sure, I'm in for 50K. And then everyone else came in, and we raised 2.6 million and did this like journey for 3 or 4 years. It was a lucky break. But something I think I'm always going to be grateful for, and I think it's a good example of some magic. There are certain things like you should operate with the assumption that every single win you have to fully earn it, but as I look back over my career, there have been a number of people that have given me favor in key moments, and those were fortunate circumstances. I'm very grateful for them, and I think that's part of what made Silicon Valley great, and I think it's still there.
Francis, I love it. Thank you for sharing this story. Thank you for sharing all the other stories. This was just inspiring to listen to again, and with the new insights, and I can't wait to keep following your journey and continue getting inspired. So thank you for everything that you're doing, both to me, the listeners, but also to humanity with all the different products that you're building. Before we leave, I have to ask you the most important question, which is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself. And I know that I'm already keeping you late, so thank you for being generous with your time.
Yeah, iconoclast, classicist, and amateur. Iconoclast because I tend to go against the norms, even when the norms are aesthetic. I think it has contrarian is a word we're familiar with, but iconoclasm has a sort of aesthetic connotation. And sometimes being a contrarian it's actually unpopular and weird, and even can look ugly. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, it's a weirdo. And I think you have to embrace that. And then classicist, because I think that which is ancient is often futuristic. They're the things that don't change that you can learn the most from. And I think reading original sources in general is good. And particularly when it comes to books, I love reading books by dead people. And then amateur, because in the old word amatore, you have to have a certain love for, trying new things and being like a child and making mistakes. So I have many things that I do that I'm not an expert in by any stretch of the imagination. Like I love to paint. I love to learn about subjects I know very little about. Like I was reading a bunch of white papers about autonomous vehicles, and I'm just totally out of my depth. But hey, I think that helps make you well-rounded. And I think that for a couple hundred years, everyone's been trying to become more specialized. But I think going back to the Renaissance idea of being the polymath and being versatile is a better way to go. But to do that, you have to embrace the identity of an amateur.
Francis, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you again.
Cheers, Michael.